Have you ever tried to buy a wine directly from a winery, but then you paused for a moment when you realized there was a minimum required to ship? Often wineries are restricted by the high cost to ship their wines, import taxes, and so much more. And so this may make them require a 6, 12, 18, or 24 bottle minimum on a purchase, which restricts a lot of consumers from buying or investing in that significant amount of wine. Well, today on the show, I have an awesome guest that is solving this problem. So if you've ever found yourself in those shoes, you're gonna love today's episode. Hi friends, my name is Sarah and I'm a certified sommelier and host of the Wine CEO podcast. And each week on this show, I dive into a different wine related topic to help make wine more fun and approachable for the average consumer. Today on the Wine CEO podcast show, I had the great opportunity to sit down with Moshe Weizman. And Moshe is the co-founder of an incredible program called Wining. And this platform is bringing sellers together with buyers in a way that is truly, I think, going to absolutely shake up the wine industry. For a lot of small wineries and distributors, getting their wines to consumers around the globe can be challenging. There's exportation fees, there's taxes, there's shipping fees. There's so many things that add cost that can make it very difficult for these winemakers and distributors to sell their wine unless the buyer is willing to purchase it in bulk. Well, Wining is changing that game where it allows group purchasing to make it easier for these winemakers and distributors to get their wines out to consumers all around the globe. I'm really excited about this platform. As someone who works in tech in my full-time gig, I was truly having a great time chatting with Moshe about this really innovative platform and how it could change the wine buying game for many around the globe. So let's go ahead and dive into my conversation with Moshe Weizman all about Wining. All right. Well, Wine CEO podcast listeners, I am so excited. This is an episode that I have really been looking forward to. Moshe and I met a couple days ago to talk about his company and the incredible things he's doing to disrupt the wine industry. And we did a lot of prep, and I'm so excited to sit down and have a chance to dive in into what Moshe is doing and then be able to bring this to everyone. So first of all, Moshe Weizman is the co-founder and CEO of Wining, which is a really interesting business that I think is going to disrupt the wine industry in some cool ways. So I'm excited to have him on the show. He's from Israel. And so we're doing this Zoom, and I am so excited to have Moshe on the show. So Moshe, welcome to the Wine CEO podcast.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yes, so excited to have you. We have already started the conversation about wining, and I'm excited to bring it to the listeners today. We'll talk about what wining is in a second and what this unique collaborative buying experience is. But before we dive into that, I would love if you could tell folks how you got into wine, kind of your entrance into the wine industry, and maybe what started to inspire you to get to a point where you realized there was a need for wining today.
Sure. So I'm 46 years old, from Israel, as you said. Although I have a lot of international passages in my life. My mother's French, lived for 6 years in Montreal. But I'm an only child uh, to my parents, who had in the 80s a very a high cuisine French restaurant in Tel Aviv. So I was most of the time with them, of course. So grew between white tablecloths, so lots of alcohol, people with suits. So gastronomy, alcohol, and wine in general always around, and I always liked it, and drank it a lot from an early age. About 10 years ago, in parallel to my regular life, which was in sales and software sales, enterprise software sales and finance, I wanted to add to my interest in drinking wine, to knowing about wine. So I did my WSET levels 2 and 3 studies in Tel Aviv. And a year and a half ago, I got my sommelier certification from the Court of Master Sommelier. All of which basically as a hobby. Wine is a big passion for me. I like drinking different and new stuff. It's like a discovery mode that kind of never ends. And about a year and 3 months, I had the privilege of having the opportunity of linking my professional experience to the wine industry with wining. And along with my co-founder, who's Dutch, we started it up. So I'm kind of living the dream, but also through the roller coaster of a startup and developments and money raising. So it's fun on one hand, but it's one hell of a ride.
I'm sure. And before we get into whining, so you're from Israel, obviously a big consumer of wine. What are
Yep.
you seeing as far as the market in Israel, in the Middle East? What are you seeing as far as the demand from consumers, wineries popping up? Curious to get your perspective.
Okay, so it's very interesting because first of all, wine has been in the Middle East for ages. I mean, not really Middle East, but amazing wines from Greece, Cyprus, on the Mediterranean. And yeah, Israel have been, or that region has been making wine since the biblical times. The wine, I would say, wine industry in Israel is relatively young. People tend to forget about it, but it's just a 70-year-old country. And in the 60s and 70s, the Rothschild family from France brought in mostly Bordeaux grapes to the region to start planting them. By the way, same goes for Lebanon, which is a great wine region. And up until the end of the 90s, there were something like 10 registered wineries in Israel. Fast forward 25 years, there are over 400. Because we're a relatively small country, just 10 million people or just a bit less, consumption is rising. I mean, very progressively and constantly, but it's not in the numbers of US consumption and Europe consumption. The Israelis are it's a very interesting point related to what we do, but are very digital adopters. So e-commerce, buying online, wine as well is something that is very easily onboarded with them because we're innovative in our state of mind. But I have to say that again, because we're a young wine industry, I would say I could put in my professional, personal point of view. Our wines are good, but they're very expensive. Winemaking in Israel is still expensive. It's not like winemakers owned the land for centuries. They either don't own the land or just bought it recently. But it's a process, and as long as consumption is going high. By the way, import into Israel is also getting better, so we're seeing wine basically from all over. So it's a young, cool, digitally oriented wine industry.
I love that. That's great. Thanks for sharing your perspective. You've now mentioned this kind of digital direction as well as collaborative buying, and that's kind of starting to set the stage here for our listeners. So tell us about wining. So, what exactly is it? Tell us what inspired you to start the company, and more about what wining is and how you feel it's going to disrupt the wine market.
All right. So the inspiration came from COVID times. I'll try and tell it very shortly. I was making a living out of selling software abroad. I was constantly on planes, mostly in Europe, which was great because I was a lot in France and Italy, so getting exposed to that wine industry, etc. I never bought wines domestically. I always brought it with me. Touch wood, I'm kind of an expert in bringing in wines in suitcases. So I constantly brought in wines. I wasn't buying foreign wines in Israel. Also, because of my high consumption of wine, I was also very sensitive to value for money. And value for money doesn't necessarily mean cheap, but I saw the differences of prices when I was buying them at a Monoprix in Paris as opposed to a retailer in Israel. Then COVID struck and I couldn't fly. So, the wine fridge or my wine cave suddenly, the number of wines dropped. And I was looking for alternatives. And then I happened to see that one Israeli retailer, who I never bought from before, had this concept called Grand Sale, which is two days a year in which they only sell in cases. So, by the way, cases of wines in Europe are 6 bottles, US 12 bottles. So I thought, okay, this must be the opportunity for me. So I went to this, they did it at a big warehouse, everybody's still with their masks. And then I was looking, and the deals were interesting, but they were all 6 or 12 bottle cases. They also sold 12 bottle cases. And I'm not a case buyer. So obviously I needed to start, putting together a group of people that would buy the case and many other cases. So I started to call up people, text people, convince them to get the wine. Once I did it, which took some time and hassle, needed to buy the wine, put it in the card and get it to the people. They needed to pay me back, blah, blah, blah. As I looked around and I literally saw everybody else doing it. Everybody. Like nobody was buying a case for himself. It was mind blowing. And I said, okay, there's something here. And that's, this process needs to get digitalized. And then the whole idea started to brew with regards to wining. And wining is, I won't get into the roller coaster of raising the first money and setting the first product out, but wining is a collaborative selling as a service digital platform. It enables wine sellers to sell their quantity-based offerings, like cases or more than a case, to individuals that collaborate to reach those minimums. So if, for example, you're offering right now in an individually based e-commerce tool, which is 99.9% of all of the tools, you want to sell a case, you need to sell it to one person. That's it. However, the statistic is, and this is between the time when the idea started and when we actually started doing it, we've done a lot of research. The statistic is that 80 to 85% of people globally are not case buyers, meaning any quantity offer that you would put there for 6, 12, 18, 24, or even more is simply not relevant to 80 to 85% of people. And we basically took that statistic and the concept of individual buying, which is what e-commerce is based on today, and turned it into something that is collaborative. The bottom line is it's a B2B platform, meaning our customers are not the end customers. They're not the wine buyers. Our customers are the merchants, the sellers, whether it's a winery, a website, an importer where he can legally do it, a retailer. They're our customers, and they could basically use our tool in circumstances that they and the wine industry in general already have. Circumstances where they have gatherings of audiences, either physical or digital, when there's a high intent to buy of that audience and a good deal offered to that audience. These three circumstances or three angles to a circumstances are already happening every day, all day throughout the industry. It could be a tasting room, it could be a future sale, it could be a festival, it could be a sending out of a newsletter to your club. Those three things are happening all of the time. But from an e-commerce perspective, today, they all lead to an individual buying experience, meaning when I'm in my cart, when I need to press buy at the end, I'm alone. And that's what we're changing. We're turning in that experience into a collaborative one. And since we launched this, we're just reaching our 90th sale in Italy, in France, in Israel, and now starting in the US. We just onboarded our first US wineries, and we're seeing first a higher turnover in the same circumstances where an individual buying tool was used. We're seeing in the digital use cases, meaning where nothing physical. It's like sending out a link somewhere, either to your club or newsletters, whatever. We're seeing a very high conversion rate. Standard conversion rates today for e-commerce websites are between 2 to 3%. If you have that, that's pretty good. So with our sales, it's between 7 to 11. That's very high. Why? Very simple. It's the psychology of e-commerce. We get a group of people together, we give them a common goal, a limited amount of time, and a good deal, and they will simply respond. The two other things that we see that our platform does is one, and I hope we will get to a demo shortly, but our platform really looks like a game. So it resonates with a younger audience, which is a whole different discussion and a big challenge that the industry is facing. And the last thing, which is, to be honest, something that we didn't aim for, but we suddenly realized we do, is the fact that our tool, by definition, creates more data for the seller to do something with. One consumer that they know that he likes Sauvignon Blanc or Cabernet Sauvignon, whatever. Because we, by definition, take the case deals or the quantity deals and split them between many people, the data collection process and the quality of the data is much higher. So now, with using a collaborative selling tool, the winery also has much more data to play with, to learn from, and to know how to customize their future sales. That was a long answer to a short question. I'm sorry.
No, that was absolutely brilliant. And I agree. I would love to do a demo next because I think with any type of software, it's great for the user to be able to experience it. But to kind of summarize all of that for our listeners, so basically what you've done is created a unique buying experience where you have the ability to collaborate on purchasing cases of wine where you might be able to, as the end consumer, buy one bottle, two bottles, four bottles. You don't have to buy a whole case. So you're making it easier for the consumer. Now, you mentioned that your main customer is really business to business. So you're really looking to help those winemakers or distributors that before were not moving as much product because the end consumer wasn't willing to buy a whole case. So you're helping them by making it easier for them to be able to break up their cases and sell them. But obviously, the end consumer is benefiting here too. So that may not have been your initial customer, but a lot of the listeners are probably thinking from the perspective of, okay, wow, I can really benefit from this because I can buy wines that otherwise I might not have access to. So it's brilliant. And honestly, I have been really excited to learn more about your product because I do agree that it is such a game changer in our wine industry because right now, you are very limited as both the seller and the consumer. And up to this point, before wining, it has made it very challenging for both businesses and consumers to be able to affordably buy great wine without having to buy two cases or three cases or whatever the minimum was. So absolutely love it. I'm so thrilled with your product. I think it's incredible and truly filling a gap in the market. So maybe let's do a quick demo because I think that would help
Sure.
the viewers kind of understand what the platform looks like and what the experience is. And then from there, we'll kind of ask some questions and talk more about what the experience is.
All right. So another not added value, but something like whining inside that's nice is that our platform doesn't require any integration or installation. Once a seller wants to conduct a sale, he goes through a very easy digital onboarding process, which takes a minute to decide which bottles he wants to offer, what are the quantities, what are the prices. And then he gets from us a URL that is a ready-to-use, basically a ready-to-use e-commerce system that is solely his and solely for that sale. So if he does 4 sales with us during a day, let's say for 4 buses that park outside the winery and come in, there will be 4 URLs that we will provide him and he could share. Sometimes we could even provide different types of URL for the different channels of promotion. So I don't know, for the newsletter, social media, SMS, whatever. So what you're looking at right now is what the end user sees once he clicks those URLs that the seller promoted. So everything is customizable and disclaimer, this is from our demo environment, so some brands and pictures here are really random. There's a pop-up here that the merchant can customize. Now, another disclaimer, we're a startup. So this is our MVP, our minimum viable product. It is far from being perfect, but we're at a stage where it does the work. I mean, it proves what it needs to work, and obviously there's an ocean of roadmap things that we need to change, but we like it. So once you log on, you see a bit of instructions at the top. There's a clock at the top that could be customized. So these could be, there's a time element here in order to intrigue and push the consumers to act fast. So at a visitor center, this could be like a 15-minute sale, but we have done pre-import sale and future sales that lasted 2 months. So it doesn't really matter, and it's not our concern. The merchant did. What happens here is you can see 6 products. Again, they're all just examples, 6 different wines that this retailer, in this example, opted to try and sell. What you see here, it's the same for each product, but you see a product with its details. And then the merchant, the seller, the retailer here, decided there is a minimum quantity, a minimum target to reach a discount. In this case, on this Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand, it's 17% discount. Should the minimum target be reached, which is 6 bottles. And he basically put the minimum target of 6 bottles on all of the other wines, okay? That means that the discount goes into action only if everyone together reaches 6 and it could be 12, it could be 24, everything is up to the seller. Me, as a user, what I can do here is I can basically decide that I'd like one Sauvignon Blanc, and I'll go down and take one of this Pinot Gris and another one of this nice Judean Hill Israeli wine. Then I go through my checkout. I submit all of the details that needed to be submitted, including my payment details, but there's no charge at this stage, the end of the deal or the deals reaching their goals. So as a side note, this is a very important area of what we do in the context of our US activity, because we're not a US company, we don't have a license to sell alcohol. So we've just onboarded a fulfillment compliant partner that basically all of the details that are being written here by the user go to them, and they take care for the winery of the invoicing, the charge, and the fulfillment, which is very, very important in the US. Assuming I filled all of these details, okay, what will happen from a user experience is that the bottles in the deals that I pledged for will simply get colored. So other people that are logged on, just as I am, they will see the progress. They will realize that they are not alone. And that by itself generates engagement. When this is happening physically at a wine festival or a tasting room or a winery after a tasting, the dynamics between the people is amazing, because people who possibly didn't even know each other start talking to each other. Hey, Sarah, we're missing one bottle here. Would you mind? And we will join. It creates a great experience. And another thing that may seem very simple from a user experience is a little feature that we've added recently that seem to be probably one of our most important features, and that's the sharing option. So what happens here is that obviously we don't claim facing the merchant that we provide to him new traffic. We don't. We just claim that we will convert better on traffic that he already has. So what happens here is that, again, wine is a very, very specific product. People like to talk about what they're buying, what are they drinking with other people. They like to recommend, and people also like to get recommendations for great deals or great wines. So this sharing button enables the people that are exposed to the deal, no matter what they are, whether they're club members of a certain winery and suddenly got a newsletter push, or whether they are at the winery and there's a sale going on, and oh my God, my mother-in-law loves New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, or my sister's got to be here. You can share the link, and then basically a buyer becomes kind of a promoter. And again, this collaborative aspect comes to play. What you see here in the middle is the bottle that did already reach its minimum target, and that's why you don't see the colored bottles here. But there are still bottles available in the stock per the merchant's decision. So the merchant decides whether the minimum target is also the stock, or he could upsell. The last thing I wanted to mention, because we always get that question instinctively, is what happens if a deal didn't reach its goal. So we have a feature that's on the back-end side for the merchant. It's called Merchant's Choice. So the merchant can decide whether he respects the rules of the platform, and deals that didn't reach the target are simply not happening, and the consumer can opt to buy the wine at the regular price. Or, and this is something we're seeing a lot, we often see very often see occasions where not 100% of the deals were pledged. However, the total amount of bottles pledged for, again, because of the collaborative aspect that is pushing people to pledge for, that total amount of bottles is still interesting enough for the merchant to accept all of the deals. For example, let's say that the merchant had only these 3 bottles that you see in front of you for sale, and only the New Zealand one, the one at the left, and the one in the middle reached their target, and even almost sold out. But this bottle of Italian Cab had 1 or 2 bottles. The merchant can see the total amount of pledges. So if for whatever reason he sees that the total is still interesting enough for him, he can accept, in order to make everybody happy, also the 2 bottles that were in this deal and didn't reach their goal. The idea here is to give the merchant total control of what he sells, when, for how long, for what price, and in what quantity. We're not asking the merchants to create new deals, heavily discounted deals for us. Not at all. We're telling them, give us the quantity deals that you are offering right now, and we will help you move them. And that's the whole idea.
So, have you found the majority of your customers are distributors? Are they winemakers directly? What's been kind of the, I guess, the makeup of that so far?
Very, very good question. First of all, a lot of the mistakes that you do when you're trying something new, especially in a startup, is deciding who do you sell to first. And a decision I've made is to start this in Europe, with wineries in Europe, in France and Italy. And you know as much as I do, their traditional thinking and state of mind is, that and digital adoption doesn't go together. But my mother tongue is French, so I felt comfortable trying it in France. It took a lot of time for them to be convinced. And although we do have European customers which are happy, I might as well spend that time in on American soil, because the digital adoption here is much faster. So the instinct, that's the geographic aspect of who do we sell to first. The focus is shifting to the US, no question. Here, what's been very interesting is that the first idea was to help wineries sell DTC. Why? Because of the whole club iceberg that's about to hit. We could talk about it later if you wish. Because they were looking for more opportunities to leverage the gatherings that they have, either at tastings or at dinners that they do, to sell DTC to the end customer. So I would say that our first target is the winery. However, we are starting to see, and that's why I'm talking to you from the East Coast, we are starting to see retailers starting to get interested in this. We've already done 2 use cases with importers, which is very interesting because that also wasn't something that we had in mind. Because of the 3D tier system here, we're helping importers sell to distributors. Meaning, instead of breaking up cases into bottles, we are breaking up containers into pallets and pallets into cases. The concept is exactly the same, but it lets the seller leverage his audience better by letting them collaborate without them necessarily knowing who is collaborating, but they're not alone in their purchasing. And hence, for importers, we're able to move more stock and faster. And that's a great added value for the importer, because having his stock lay at the pier or whatever costs him money. And the last use case that we're seeing, going back to the wineries, is a wineries B2B use case. I'll give you an example of a few wineries that we've met in California last week. Some of them are in Sonoma or in the Central Coast, and they're happy with their sales at the winery, but they would love to get into San Francisco or Los Angeles restaurants. However, there are not a lot of restaurants in that area that either know about their winery, or even if they knew, would take a case, which would justify the delivery. So their situation in the market is, we would prefer to have more restaurants or retailers buying from us, even if each of them buys only 3 bottles a month or 4 bottles a month. The adoption is much more important to them. And with wining, they have a tool to basically sell to few restaurants together. And once they reach the goal that they had in mind, but only for 1 restaurant, but now it's for 4 restaurants, the shipping element becomes irrelevant. They would make the travel anyway, but they would be more happy because not only 1 restaurant is selling them, but 3 or 4. So the collaborative aspect could be applied in many, many different use cases. I personally think that wineries, as an alternative for club and as a leverage to sell more in dinners or other gatherings, is the top use case for us, which is the one we're looking for at first. Whatever comes alongside that is a bonus.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about disrupting any industry, I think you have to look at multiple use cases. And that's where I think this product is so interesting, because it really has incredible potential at hitting different users throughout the market in the wine industry, right? And for some of our consumers that are listening to the Wine CEO podcast, who might just be an individual consumer, they go to a big box store and they buy their wine. It's important to remember that a lot of the winemakers and distributors and importers face incredible fees when it comes to taxes, right? When it comes to shipping fees. And so a platform like Whining that helps share that burden in essence, right, between multiple users, it allows some of those smaller winemakers, smaller distributors to be able to get greater visibility to their product. Consumers that never would have had the opportunity to see that before will have a chance to try that product and experience it. And so this opens up the door for again, winemakers that have a smaller budget for marketing that aren't able to get their wines out there, but also for
Yes.
some of these distributors and importers who are selling directly to restaurants and other shops throughout the world that could afford 2 or 3 bottles, but wouldn't be able to take a whole case or, even a half case, right? So I think this is amazing. I would love to mention or have us talk about two things, because you talked about wine clubs, and I think we're seeing a shift in the industry around wine clubs. So I'd love to get your thoughts first on why we're seeing wine clubs start to be less popular and why they're kind of phasing out, and how you think this would be able to maybe fill in a gap around wine clubs. And then I have a second question for you in a second too, because there's so many topics here, because I just love this whole way that wining works. So wine clubs, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, everything I say obviously needs to have a disclaimer on it. I'm not US based, but I can modestly say that I've been swimming in the American way of selling, buying, importing wines quite extensively of late, but I'm still not an expert. I can definitely see that, like in anything, accepting that change is needed is hard. It's natural. That's how humans work. What's happening right now in the context of wine clubs is that we have an industry, which is the American wine industry, that's basically built itself around one way of selling, or one main way of selling. You would have people register to your clubs. Cash flow wise, it's great because people tend to pay in advance for 6, 12, 24 bottles a year. It's a long-term commitment. You're able to move stock, and that's the way it just worked. It's just the way it worked. Like a whole industry built on one main concept. The thing is that if you look at the statistics, and it's not rocket science, it's very clear. Most of the people registered to clubs today are baby boomers minus.
Yep.
A bit older people than you and I, much older than. And, life hits, and these people either, unfortunately, are no longer with us, or drink less,
Yeah.
or stop drinking at all, or are simply not interested in a club anymore because of many reasons. It's funny, I've had a winery that I was talking to about, really good winery, asking them about their wine club and how many people, and they just started opening up to me, oh, it's right, we didn't get a response from a lot of people on the wine clubs. And I said, okay, have you investigated why? And one of the other people in the meeting said, yes, some of them are just dead. And so it just happens, okay? So now you have this iceberg of your main source of revenues that is literally fading away. And
Yeah.
you have this younger generation who's totally, totally different in every aspect there is compared to boomers. Uh, their demographics, social background, will to commit to quantities and to one brand, financial ability, and not to mention a totally different challenge, which I'm happy I'm not addressing right now, the thing, this non-alcohol movement kind of thing, God forbid.
The
No, but
sober.
they have alternatives. It's either beer, it's either spirits, it's either non-alcoholic beverages, and sometimes, especially if you're in California, younger people get their high from things that are not wine, but they're
Yeah.
legal there.
Yep.
So you simply can't try to sell to that audience in the same way that you sold to boomers. You can't build your wholesale and marketing strategy about, okay, how do I get people to the winery? And once I get them to the winery, how do I get them registered to the club? It's like driving into a wall. But it's an understanding that's hard for wineries. And the thing is, I was last week at YVI, which is the Central Coast Conference for Wineries, and Erica Ducey, which is a great person, by the way, shared very interesting statistics to say that younger people drink less wine is almost statistically not true. After soft drink, wine and beer are the two alternatives. They just buy it differently, and they also buy it because of different reasons. For example, boomers count on one spectator and whatever notes and ratings, etc. Younger Gen Z, X or Y, they would count on their friends' recommendations. And that's where, again, the collaborative aspect of getting people the feel that they're in a sale, but they're not alone. They're with other people who, wow, that this wine is really, I should not miss it and join. You need to try and sell differently to these people. And that's where there's an opportunity, not only for wining, by the way, but for other digital solutions to penetrate this opportunity. I mean, I know it's a challenge for the industry, but again, it's an opportunity for players like us to show the winemakers, and it's not an easy job, that they could sell differently. Something that I found is similar between Europe and the US, which surprised me. I don't know why. Is that most of the winemakers, at the end of the day, they're farmers. Just like in Piedmont or in Tuscany, they've been making wine for years, and it's hard for them to adopt. And that's why it always helps that, there's a son or a daughter or a nephew or a son-in-law that's involved there that also understands, okay, we need to do something different. By the way, there are already little signs of change in wanting to address the younger audience. For example, cheaper wines. So a lot of wineries would make 3 or 4, 5, 6 type of wines. Maybe it's too expensive. Let's make a wine that's more approachable. That's one way. And also, again, I heard this last week, there are more and more wine clubs that are now ready to get you registered into the club for 3 bottles. That's unheard of 3 years ago. Why? Because they understand that they need to do something. So that these are also the new things that the industry could do, but it could also adopt tools like us
Yeah.
to sell in a different way.
And I think we're seeing a lot of younger consumers that want more transparency in labeling, right? They want to know calorie content, nutrition facts. They have a little more concern around what exactly is in the product that they're drinking or eating or whatever. And so we've seen that impacting the way that winemakers are labeling their products or packaging their products, right? Gen Z tends to be really focused on sustainability as well. So I think you're right. I think there's such great opportunity, and we have to, as an industry, embrace these opportunities and see how we can pivot to stay relevant. Because I agree with you. I don't think it's that Gen Z is just not drinking at all, but I think they're consuming differently, and the industry has to react. I think sometimes wine, in general, as an industry, has a reputation for being stodgy and a little slow to adapt, and they kind of lean toward a more mature consumer. And I think in the past they have, but to your point, we're seeing those baby boomers start to move out of the picture, and the main dollars are sitting with younger millennials, Gen Z, and we have to figure out how we're going to really approach them, which kind of is a good dovetail into my second question that I had after the wine clubs, which is gamifying the buying experience. And you touched on that a little bit, and how whining makes it really fun and collaborative. I'm going to guess that you feel that is going to really impact Gen Z and the way that they're perceiving buying, because that's something that they love: collaboration, anything that, to your point, what's my friend buying, what's a influencer I follow buying. So how are you looking at maybe continuing to gamify the experience so that whining is going to fit that need?
So again, I'm old enough to remember a very, very famous presidential campaign quote that's kind of relevant to what you just said. So when Clinton was running for president, there was a very famous quote: "It's the economy, stupid." And in our case, I'm saying it's the platform, stupid. I totally agree with what you said about wineries, the labels, environmental sensitive stuff. I agree, but I still don't think that the issue is the liquid, the product. I think the issue is the platform on which the liquid is sold. And getting to your question, if you would make a wine buying experience similar to other social experience that the younger generations have, wouldn't that possibly be easier? We think yes. So we've turned wine selling into what the younger generation is doing when they play games. You know, they collaborate with people virtually, people they haven't met, that they don't know. Social media, as you just said, we're encouraged by what we see, by what our friends are doing. It's comforting for us to see that someone else is doing something. It gets the objection level lower, and that's precisely what we're doing with this gamification of element. I haven't talked about it in the demo, but getting back to a sales situation, the platform can identify, for example, that let's say one specific deal is one bottle shy of reaching its targets, and it can communicate with you and tell you, Sarah, we saw that you pledged for 2 other bottles. We're missing one bottle on this, whatever wine it is. Would you mind joining in, helping your buddies make it happen? And sometimes the merchant will also be able to compensate you with, I don't know, a 10% discount on your next purchase or whatever. And on the other hand, if the system identifies that, for example, you're the only pledger in a deal that's not even close to getting funded, it would also approach you and tell you, listen, Sarah, it doesn't look like your deal is getting its limits. Would you like to juggle your pledges? And then people basically are able to play with the wines like stocks. You can move pledges from one, and that's a massive game changer in this game of buying wines, which again, simply totally different from the way wine is sold today. It's a big challenge to get people to adopt it, but it's a great opportunity.
Well, I know you have your work cut out for you because this is very different than anything that the industry and most winemakers and consumers are used to or familiar with. But I gotta say, Moshe, I am beyond impressed. I mean, I'm so, so excited about this product because I really think it could change things drastically for the wine industry. I think it is truly a disruptor, and we're just at the beginning stages of seeing how your product's going to grow and really impact the industry for forever, I think.
I hope.
Yes, no, I can see it happening because it's truly incredible. Speak to first, let's say I have a lot of winemakers and industry professionals that listen to the show. Speak to them first about how they could get onboarded onto the wining, and then we'll come back to the consumers, the individuals downloading the platform, et cetera. So help us figure out if they want to learn more about wining, they want to get involved and sign up today, first to the industry professionals, the businesses, and then to the consumer.
So again, that's part of what we do that's maybe not that innovative and modern. Simply reach out to us on our website. Our website is a company website. As I said, we're not an open platform. It's not like if people go to our website, they'll see all of the open deals. We're not there. We're not the Groupon of wine. So they simply need to reach out either directly to me, if you'll be sharing my social media details, or to us. And they could simply very, very easily onboard their first. We're working on many integrations in the back end with already established e-commerce one-stop shop software houses that mostly wineries use. So Commerce 7. By the way, the Commerce 7 purchase of Wine Direct's SaaS division, very, very big development and opportunity for us. And so we're building an integration with Commerce 7 so that wining will be an application in the Commerce 7 App Store. So it's just a matter of reaching out to us, and the digital onboarding process is very simple to launch a sale. For the consumer audience, we may opt at a certain point in time to have an app out there which you can get registered to, and then get basically notifications wherever we have a deal based on your geographic location. But right now, it's a very tricky area because once you do that, it's like taking away one of the best part of my pitch to the wineries, where it's not like I'm sharing their offerings with other sellers' offerings, which is something that sellers are afraid of, this marketplace kind of state of mind, which leads me to say that at this stage, obviously people could follow us, but at this stage, they could be exposed to deals only if they are customers of the seller that we work with. So it's like whining inside under the hood of what the seller is already doing.
Got it. So they could maybe reach out to learn about some of the sellers that are already participating, and then would be able to sign up to be a part of Wining as part of the seller that they want to follow deals for. This stage, it's not quite at a point where you would just sign up as a user and then have access to look at all available deals. You're really looking for specific users.
Correct. If I may, one industry article that really made me decide to address this issue of group buying, collaborative wine, is an article by Paul Mabray called Marketplaces Eat Markets. Very interesting. I really recommend that you eat it. Of why wine marketplaces that took something similar to what we're doing, but made it an end user tool, they either didn't succeed or hit some kind of a glass ceiling, and they mostly made the sellers look bad. And I think that's my sommelier, thing in me. I don't want to make the sellers feel bad. I want to give them the whole control. I don't want to come and tell them, listen, we have 2,000 people here. What's the best price you can give us?
Sure.
So important to understand.
I think it makes perfect sense, and I'll link the article so that anyone who's interested can read it.
Definitely.
I think it's important to remember that there are so many aspects to the selling and buying experience, and you don't want to cannibalize one aspect of it because then everybody suffers. So I think it's great that you're right now looking to really protect the experience of those businesses, those small wineries, those distributors, to make sure that we're really looking out for what's going to be best for their consumer base. And then obviously folks can figure out who those wineries are and how they can get involved by getting plugged into those specific wineries and businesses. So I love it. And I'm sure as the product grows and you have more and more wineries and more businesses that are engaged, that'll be even greater opportunity for folks to experience more wines. So Moshe, this has been fabulous. I've loved being able to dive a little deeper into wining. Let me just ask if there's one thing in 2025 you're really excited about, maybe one thing you can share with us that you're really excited about bringing in this year.
To be honest, I mean, it's very nice and romantic to talk about wine selling, but at the end of the day, we're a startup trying to make our way up. So I would say that in startup terms, what's next for us, in addition to the first adopters that we already have, is what's called a product market fit, meaning not only identifying the first users, but also proving that we can bring them value. So I hope that if we talk 3 to 6 months from now, I will be able to tell you we've reached the product market fit. We understand where we bring value, and we've proven it. And and just get adoption going, more traction going, more marketing brand going, because we're just starting up.
I love it. Well, really interesting conversation today, and I'm really excited to follow along and see the exciting things that Wining is going to accomplish in the coming months. I will definitely link all of your social media links for the followers so that folks can also follow along and keep seeing how you're growing Wining. Moshe, thank you so much for coming on the Wine CEO podcast today. This was fabulous.
My pleasure, Sarah. Great.
All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Moshe. I found it absolutely fascinating. I really do think that his platform can change the way that wine is purchased around the globe. So I'm really excited to watch how they grow. If you want to learn more about Wining, check out today's show notes. You can follow along on their social media, and you can check out their website and learn a little bit more about this awesome platform and how it is truly working to disrupt the wine industry. If you loved today's episode, be sure to share it with a friend. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so now so you don't miss any of the upcoming wine content. And if you have a question about today's episode or wine in general, you can always send me an email, sarah@thewineceo.com, or you can shoot me a DM at @thewineceo on Instagram, and I'd be very happy to answer it. Until next week, friends, I hope you drink something new and delicious, and I will catch you all in the next episode of the Wine CEO podcast.